Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Patsy, for inviting me. And it's such a pleasure to come over here and talk about flycatchers. And I just realized that for the longest time that I've been mispronouncing Bexar County. I thought it was Bexar this whole time. Oh, okay. Can you hear me way in the back? Okay. So, so flycatchers are, of course, really tough birds, and um, I don't know if how many of you have gotten very interested in flycatchers yet. If you're beginners, you probably haven't gotten to that point yet. If you've been in the business for a long time, you probably have, and have experienced frustrations with identifying flycatchers. Um, yeah, so the flycatcher season is peaking right about now. They're all coming down from the north and passing through on their way to Central America. And just I was this Breckenridge this afternoon. I had 3 yellow-bellied flycatchers and a number of least flycatchers. So they're coming through. I don't know if we'll see yellow-bellieds at Mitchell Lake. It's not the right habitat. Maybe willow, maybe alder. We'll see. But yeah, so flycatchers North America. This is work that I've done with Andy Birch, a longtime collaborator. We met in our undergrad college days at Berkeley and have since just been working together the whole time. He's the illustrator, although Patsy was really nice to say that I like to illustrate. Uh, uh, Andy is a far faster and better illustrator than me. So we work out as a great team. He does the illustrations. I do the maps, text, and layout, and kind of the design and so forth. But it's been a great journey. And what I'll do is I'll spend most of the time on the volume 1, which is on Empidonax flycatchers, and I'll touch a little bit on volume 2, and then if there's time at the end, if you're still interested, there's going to be a volume 3, which we're not done yet, and I can show you a little bit of what's going to be in there. You'd be the first to see. It's quite technical though, so don't get too excited just yet. Okay, so how does this? Which one? Oh, here. Oh, there's Andy. That's me with my crazy hair. Uh, but we've been working together on a lot of hard ID problems over the years, and flycatcher is something that's always been on our mind to do, and just never got around to putting it together. But then when COVID hit and we were stuck at home, he's in California and I'm in Houston, we decided let's do it. Let's put it together. So the volume 1 was basically a COVID project, although it took us 10 years before research before to get to that point. And the EMPIDs, these are the species that are covered. It's only about 20 species in each book, which might be kind of weird to you because you get your field guide that's that thick. It's got 900 species in it, and we're giving you a book that's this thick, and there's 20 species in it. But they are such difficult ID problems that it requires some dedication to it. And so here are the birds in volume 2. Oh yeah, I start with that. So one of our goals with this book was they're so hard. On the one hand, it was written for experts, but on the other hand, it was also written to make it accessible to beginners. And I'll go through with you the first part of this book of how we bring this and make it accessible. It's really about not trying to put a name on every bird, but how to look at a bird, and just through the lens of flycatchers. But if you learn that, you can tackle any other bird as well. So this really wasn't a test. But I just wanted to put these up here to, of course, they kind of look similar, right? Yeah, and they all have wing bars. They all have an eye ring. What else? They all have a kind of long tail compared to other birds. Um, yeah, the wing bars aren't going to help you with flycatchers, right? Uh, but I don't know. If you look at these, did you see any differences? It's not a test. It's just what do you see? There's some difference in bill's size or length. What the body shape is a little different. Yeah. So, oh, you must have read the book. We'll come back to wing panel contrast, which is a quite a technical term, but that's good. um, yeah, different shape. There are slight differences in color, but probably more important, there are differences in sort of relative contrast. So this one on the right is kind of a low contrast between the wing bars and the back and the chest, whereas the one way over there on the left, really white below and dark above. And then there's other contrasts we'll talk about. In the middle, somewhere in between, kind of, right? Maybe slight difference in length of tail, relative length of tail. And the primary projection may be a slightly difference in these, all very subtle. And of course, the challenge is your long may be different from your long tail. So that looks really daunting. And this book is really going to be about how to see these subtle differences. And while it's daunting, I'm going to show you something easier. And these are egrets, and you know what these are, right? And how to identify them. The great egret has this long neck, and the cattle egret has a shorter neck. There's differences in bill size and shape, right? There's also differences in color patterns, but even if I didn't show you the colors, you could probably tell it was a cattle egret or a great egret or a snow egret. If you're just beginning, maybe not, but within a month you can, I'm sure. So you're comfortable with this, right? So that means you can see these differences, and you just have to refine it a little bit to start looking at flycatchers. So it's no different than this guy has a long neck. And shorebirds, I guess you'll have a shorebird workshop on Saturday. The same thing. They are really tough. They're all brown, and they have juvenile plumage, winter plumage, and breeding plumage. So multiply the plumages by 3. So you got to remember all of that. But if you just look at shapes of the birds, bill shape, relative size differences, lengths of legs, you can probably hit 80% of the shorebirds that way, right? So with flycatchers, that's all we're going to do, and we're not going to focus on any specific field mark with traditional sort of like Roger Torrey Peterson field guide, which was revolutionary. They have a line pointing to a specific part of the bird, the crust of a cardinal or the mask of a cardinal. In flycatchers, unfortunately, there's no single field mark that usually works, except for maybe call. And any field mark often has a lot of variability to it, which makes it all the more difficult. But the combination of field marks turns out to be unique. So putting everything together, even though they're all kind of fuzzy things, when you put it together, they are unique. And so it's about sort of holistic birding, looking at the big picture. And from that, we're looking at overall impression of the bird, but we're also going to talk about also shapes and proportions, contrast, but also voice, habitat, behavior, and even migratory status. So you bring all of those together. That's the way to identify flycatchers. Okay? And if you have questions, just interrupt me at any time. At some level, you're all doing this with birds. Your non-birding friends are probably, you can always wow your non-birding friends when you're walking and a mockingbird flies by and you go, that's a mockingbird. And they they can't believe that you can do that. And so you can lie all the time, of course. But you know, you can do that, and you're probably not identifying it necessarily based on its yellow eye. It's maybe the way it flies. Maybe there's flashes of white when it flies, or you can tell a sparrow flying by that it's a sparrow as opposed to a pigeon. So you're already practicing holistic birding, and what we're going to do is come back to this with flycatchers and just refine your skills with that. And what I'm going to do, what I did here is took out all the color, and I did that on purpose, and largely because we're such visual creatures and we tend to rely so much on color. Except with flycatchers, I have seen at least flycatcher literally change colors within a minute. It goes under a leaf and it becomes yellow, and it goes out in the sun, it becomes gray, and your gray and another person's olive may be the same color. So it's very hard to communicate. So with flycatchers, just drop color altogether. If you're colorblind, this is good. This is good for you. You're on level playing field. Sometimes color helps, but usually it can be more misleading than helping. So if you look back to here, you can see this relative color contrast, not the colors, but the contrast. See the very dark, almost blackish wings and the white belly on the one on the left? Oh yeah. Oh yeah, right there. See that? Okay. And then this one, although it's pale, this is also pale, not a strong contrast, and this one's sort of in between. Okay. So that's what we want to look for. And oh, where? Oh, that you mean range and distribution? Yeah, that helps too. Always look at the maps and your field guides. But of course, we're birders, and we always love the wayward vagrant. So sometimes there's some bird that's way off in the wrong place. But yeah, in general, 90% of the time, look at the timing and distribution. I've shown a couple other things, relative tail length and projection of the primaries. We'll come back to this in a second. What else? Some contrast between the wing bars and the mantle. So the goal of our talk really here is, and the book is how to look and listen to a bird. And I'm not going to stress too much on putting a name to every bird. In fact, you don't want to do that. You're going to make a lot of misidentifications and lose your credibility. After we wrote this book, we don't identify any flycatchers. Not publicly. No, you can send flycatcher photos to us, and we'll try to identify them. Okay, so the book is divided into basically two parts. There's the traditional part, the species accounts, which goes into all the detail you want about a specific species. But it's really the first part of the book, I think, that is going to be most useful, especially for beginners, but also for experts there. And that's really to come up with a common language to talk about flycatchers. So here's some examples. So bill length or shape, well, they all kind of have long pointy bills compared to a sparrow, but within the flycatcher family or the Empidonax family, there are subtle differences. And so you open that book up, you see a flycatcher, you take a photo, just line it up with your photo and see, is its bill a little bit more slender and long like a gray or these other flycatchers there, or a little bit more stubby like a Hammond's or a Least, okay? And this is just a way that you can start to see these differences, because it's very difficult when I tell someone, oh, it's got a short stubby bill, if you have no reference, you can't do it. So our book is like a ruler for you to look at. So here are some photos actually showing you examples of long versus small or shorter bills within flycatchers. Now, you may, when you open the book, be a little disappointed that there are no photographs. We did this on purpose. The problem with photographs are great, and volume 3 is going to be thousands of photographs, so you'll get it eventually. But we really wanted this book to be the flycatchers. Every image is really idealized, so it really drives the point home of what to look for, and they're all under the same lighting conditions, so you don't have to compare apples and oranges. Other things to look at, we have here the mandible color, the lower mandible color. Some have mostly dark lower mandibles and some mostly orange right here. So when you see one, just ask yourself, is it mostly orange or a little bit orange or mostly dark? That's good enough. And you just make a note of that. It's just telling you what you should look for. Eye rings. They all kind of have eye rings. I mean, there's some like willow that doesn't have much of an eye ring, but everyone else has an eye ring. But the shape of the eye ring, you should pay attention to. They're very subtle differences. You go from, say, a Western flycatcher, it's elongated at the back, like a teardrop. But that, when you see, is pretty obvious. But the rest are quite subtle. You go from what I would call a complete eye ring that's really nice and crisp edges around to something that's more fuzzy at the edges. Do you see little fuzzy at the edges? And then one where it's kind of crisp, but it's very thin. You have to look very hard to see it, but it is there. Alders would be like this. Least would be like this. And this would be like an Acadian or yellow-bellied. Full, complete eye ring. But if you got a messy eye ring where the width is changing around the eye ring, and it's kind of wide in one part, narrow in another part, you might be thinking about a least flycatcher. Other features to focus on are crown shape. Of course, the birds can move their feathers, so you kind of have to get a general impression from that. But you have the crested appearance of, say, a Western flycatcher, which you get here sometimes in the winter. I guess you'll get excited when that happens. And then a rounded crown, which would be more like least, and then flat ones like gray flycatcher. We don't get grays out here. West Texas, you get grays. And then a peaked right here, which is somewhere in between. This would be like a Acadian. The other things to look at are forehead angle, which is this part where the bill meets the forehead. Some have a very steep forehead angle, like Hammonds, and then some have a very shallow forehead angle, and that would be like Acadian or gray flycatcher. So you can actually see this. It's just practice, and the human eye can see really subtle differences. I mean, you can usually tell, for example, if your picture frame on the wall is just a little off, even if it's off by 2 degrees, you can see that. It'll probably bother you all night long, right? So you can see this, and all we're trying to do is make it so that you see it, but you can, categorize it into one of these things here and help you ID it. Okay. Tail length, relative tail length. They all have long tails compared to other birds, but some have it's all about proportions. Proportionately longer tails than others. So least has a proportionally shorter tail, and dusky would be over here, and grays would have longer tails. Another interesting feature that you can use is the width of the tail. Now, obviously, we have a lot of birds that have the same sort of feature, narrow tails. So you couldn't separate these species by the width of the tail. But it turns out things like willow flycatcher, alder flycatcher, and Acadian have fat tails, wide tails. And the other flycatchers don't. They're narrow. And one thing about the narrow tails, they even narrow towards the base of the body, kind of pinch out. You have to be careful. Birds can move their tail feathers there. So we have more in the book that you can look at, but that's just a little bit of what's in there. But let me just show you here some things you can see, right? Look at this tail and this tail. Which one's wide? Yeah, even though this one's at an angle, you can feel that's a narrow tail. You could like twist that off, and this one, that's like a stiff board, wooden board. This is also narrow or wide? This one, yeah, I guess I would call that narrow. But this is good that we were disagreeing, because this is exactly what I was saying, that one person's wide could be one person's narrow. So you want to compare it to the book. This one's hard because it's a side view, so you can't do that. But I would call this a narrow one. But you'll just have to see a lot of birds, or wait for it to turn to the side. Be patient. Flycatchers I really like, because warblers I love, of course, because they're so beautiful, but they're always up high and you're breaking your neck and they never stop. But flycatchers will sit there waiting for you sometimes if you're quiet, and you can take as many photos as you want. Okay, so now we're going to get to a few other features that that are a little bit more technical, that you've probably heard about in field guides. This is the primary projection. So birds' wings, their flight feathers here, are the outer part, or the inner part are these called the secondaries, and we call these the tertials. The top three secondaries of the tertials. So this is the secondary stack. And then the outer parts of the wing, which are the longest feathers, those are the primaries. And they protrude or stick out. And how much they stick out relative to the tertials can be useful for IDing birds. So what you'll do is look at the distance of, or the length of the tertial and the length of the primaries. And so this one you can see, this is about as long as the tertials. Here, this is much shorter than the tertials. You see that? So it's all relative. You got to make sure you see the tertials. And once you see that, you can gauge, is it somebody with a short primary extension or a long primary extension? And here you can see these differences. Look at this Acadian. Here's the tertials. Here's the primaries. I mean, the primaries, this one is even longer than the tertials, or at least the same length, right? It's almost like a knife, a saber right here. Then go to the other extreme. Look at these tertials. They stop here, and then the primaries poke out only a little bit, right? You can all see that, yeah.
Primary projection also kind of how long you think the tail is. Because the longer primary kind of makes it harder sometimes.
It can, yeah. And so another thing to look at, not sure here, is you look at this length and this length of the tail, where tail projection beyond the primaries, it's long. That's gray. Least actually has a short tail. So this is actually a gray flycatcher. And then this one, yeah, this is an Acadian, would be a medium length tail. The absolute length of the tail might actually be long, but because you're exactly right, this thing may stick out, make you feel like if I had long arms, like make my legs look short, or if I have short arms. Yeah. Oh, we're getting to the contrast. Yes. So we'll start with the wing bars, because that one, I think we're all familiar with wing bars, and the flycatchers all have wing bars, 2 of them. But what you want to look at is not, again, the color, but how much does it stand out relative to the back. So look at this. It's almost the same color as the back. And then here, it's much brighter than the back, like in a yellow belly. So we can look at photos. This is a weak, I like looking at the upper wing bar. You can barely see the wing bar compared to that. And then you go to these 2. I mean, they just pop out, right? And it helps the wings are black, but compare it to the mantle. That's usually what I do. Okay. Other things to look at are the contrast between the undersides and the upper sides, the back or the nape and the throat. Again, color is not useful. Usually, when you have the sunlight reflecting off a leaf flycatcher can look yellow. The Acadian flycatcher can look yellow. In fact, we went through all yellow-bellied flycatcher photos in the United States in the month of April in eBird, and it turns out they were all misidentified, and also in iNaturalist. Yellow belly is a late migrant. They don't come into the north of the border until like May 3rd. So they were all Acadians, mostly Acadian, and a few peewees there that look yellow. So what you want to look at for instead is compare this to that, right? Light, dark, dark, dark. The face is dark. So here's just show you some examples. The lighting's not great, but that's awesome because that's what's going to happen in the field. But you can see here, this one is showing little light, but that's the light being backlit there. But so look right here, right? And this yellow belly is not very yellow, obviously, with this lighting, but you can see it, no contrast. But take the extreme. This guy looks quite yellow, this is an Acadian, but light, dark. And then here, even this really horrible photo, because it's at the angle, you think you'd never be able to do anything with this sort of photo, because you can't see that primary projection well, the tail is weird looking, but look at how white and dark that is. So there's still, even in the weirdest position, there are some features you can see. And if you told me there's a strong upper part contrast that you saw, then I would already rule out yellow belly in general. All right, wing panel contrast. Yeah. So this is a funny one that, remember what I said, that the wings have the secondaries and the primaries. And we consider the whole secondaries as one panel, the secondary panel, and the primaries, which go from here to here, as the primary panel. And the secondaries always have pale edges to them, right here, see? And then the primaries sometimes have pale edges depending on what species you're looking at, and some don't. So this one, it has a kind of hint of pale edges. They're usually never as strong as the secondary pale edges, but they got a hint. And so what that means, if you look from a distance, the primaries don't look very dark. And so I would call that a weak panel contrast between the secondaries and the primaries, whereas you look at something like this, in least it has no pale edges to the primary feathers. So it's often a really black primary panel. And so black and then white, gray, and then lighter gray. So here, look how dark this is. And then look here, you can see it's kind of striping there. Yeah. Yeah, it's obviously the wings are still dark, but the feathers are still, but the edges are just pale enough that from a distance, it almost looks like it's just continuous. Where this one, yeah, these are two different sets of feathers. Okay, you see that? So it'll take time to learn all these things and just go out and practice. This is just showing you what you're up against. But where they overlap, the closer they are, the closer the resemblance there are. So something like a gray flycatcher, you're unlikely to ever confuse it with an olive-sided flycatcher. But if you're looking at least, you should worry about these guys. Okay, in there. There's always some exceptions. Sometimes some gray flycatcher will morph into one of these. Yeah. And then this is a summary of all the features, some of the features I talked to you about. And you can see these are the species, and it'll tell you, like for crown shape, is it peaked or whatever shape it is, it tells you. And you can see that there's complete overlap with every bird. But the combination of them is a unique code. You probably won't use this unless you are one of those types of people that loves codes here.
Kind of photo.
Yeah, you can score it. You
Go down.
you go down that, you can score it. Yes.
Check all the boxes
Mhm.
to make yourself feel like
That's what this is for. You can't do this in the field. I wouldn't recommend doing this in the field because you'll be spending your time writing. You should look at the bird. Yeah. Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time on vocalizations, but the book we have spectrograms in there for every species there, and what that is this is frequency, so higher pitch up there, and then this is time. And so the main things to learn is how to visualize sounds. And that helps you learn the sound because for most people, including myself, it's not so easy to memorize a bird song or a bird call, especially if they're just variants of chip notes, right? But if you can visualize it, it can help. And so, for example, there's this rising whit that you get for a least flycatcher or a willow flycatcher. And then a pip would look like this. Then there's the slurred sweet sort of calls of Western flycatchers, and then bury notes that would look like that. So right now, you don't need any special equipment. You have Merlin, you have your iPhone, just record it. When in doubt, just record the bird. Even the most terrible recording has saved the day for someone because I can usually listen and we can figure it out. And if we even can't hear it, we can process it and we may even be able to see. Yeah. So try to get a recording. Now, when you're out in the field, pay attention to habitat all the time. Some flycatchers, when they breed, they have very specific habitats they like. So which one? This looks like West Texas.
That's right.
It is almost. This actually is in California, but it does look like the Davis Mountains. And that's good. Actually, this is the sort of habitat you might get a gray flycatcher in California. In West Texas, the species of plants are a little bit different, but the structure, then you got pinions there, and gray flycatcher will be like in the Big Bend area in this same sort of habitat. So it doesn't matter where you go, even on migration, the flycatchers will tend to find their preferred habitat. So this very shaded area, you're going to get Western flycatcher and yellow-bellied flycatcher. Even vagrant yellow-bellieds in California are going to be in this. They're not going to be out in that. No way. They just hate that. This would be the open pine forest for dusky flycatcher. Least flycatcher might be on the edge of something like that, but not necessarily deep in. And then we have all these maps that we spend a lot of time making. That's my geology side, I guess. But it tells you where they breed, but we also have the migratory routes, and then when you're likely to see them. And I show you yellow-bellied here because that's a really interesting one in the spring. So the flycatchers, if you go to Houston and High Islands in spring, we're always talking about trans-Gulf, birds that fly across the Gulf of Mexico. They get tired, hit High Island. But flycatchers do not go across the Gulf. None of them fly over water, except for a few dumb ones every year. But they really don't. They did a study of on the oil rig out here, and I think the whole season they got 2 flycatchers. I don't know what they were doing out there, but they go around. Okay, they just hug the land. In the spring they come up, and yellow-bellied does not cross the Mexican-U.S. border until like May 2nd, May 3rd. I found no other records there. And then they go. So if you think you see a yellow-bellied on April 28th, you really should be careful. It's probably something else. Yeah. But then they go up and spread across the continents here. And then in the fall, so they go up and they pretty much skip Louisiana and even the easternmost part of Texas. So if you go to Sabine Woods, you're not going to find yellow bellies in the spring, but in the fall, they come through with a vengeance for some reason. We don't know why. They come right down through Louisiana, and they're very common there. So the spring and fall routes are a little bit different. Oh, I will say peewees. They we think some of them do go across, but we're not 100% sure. I may have to make that arrow smaller. Yeah, the peewees. Maybe, yeah.
Not stopping in High Island because they're not exhausted from flying over the Gulf, right? That, like, for fall,
Yeah,
they're not part of fallout because of the.
we get, yeah, John Dunn, I don't know if you must have heard of his name. He was responsible for a large part of the National Geographic Guide, many of the editions, and I was talking to him and what flycatcher, because he leads trips to High Island every year. What flycatcher have you seen there? And he said, I've never seen any other flycatcher there but Acadian. And he's right, because first of all, he leads all the trips in April, and no flycatchers make it before April, except maybe least Acadian does, and least can just barely get in. But in the spring, they don't go. They're really pretty rare at High Island, and so they go up through here and along Point Aransas area and all the way out to San Antonio. Yeah, they go up, and then by that time they head north. So they skip East Texas, the Upper Texas coast. In the fall, they accumulate here, and then we get them. Okay, so we'll go through some of these birds here, and of course, the first thing to do is make sure you know the difference between a peewee and a empid, and it's sometimes can be tough. Uh, they look all the same in terms of color, but the main thing is the primary projection of peewees. See that? Look how long that thing is. Yeah, so that's a peewee, and that's a Empidonax. So as long as you get to look at the wing, you're usually good to go. Yes, they can have more peaked head. Here's a peewee, eastern wood peewee, and I showed two photos. One where it looks yellow and can be misidentified as a yellow bellied, and this is its more normal thing. But this is because it's in the shade, and the light just reflecting off the green leaves, so it looks very yellow. But again, look at this fat, wide tail, long primary projection, peak, really strong, and very heavy bill. Okay. And no eye ring. Yeah, this one I can't see, but yeah, no eye ring. Yeah. We'll go through a few of these. Since it's online, you can look at this later in more detail. But Acadian flycatcher, we're going into the empids right now. The most distinctive feature of the Acadian is it has a long primary projection, not as long as a peewee. So you have to rule out peewee first. Once you got that ruled out, this has the longest one right here.
These lot more out of this area, like out of Los Naples, they breed.
They breed there, yes. Yeah.
Pizza, pizza, pizza.
Yeah. They have strong wing bar contrast, strong, very white below compared to the back, and a crisp eye ring, very nice crisp eye ring. In this case, this one has a very shallow forehead. This one too, although this one doesn't have a peak. So this is an example where, yeah, okay, sometimes the field mark doesn't work. But that's why you have to use all of these things together. And these are Andy's great plates, just showing you different angles of the Acadian and more maps here, how they move around. Some do hop the islands here. They are the earliest migrant of the flycatchers, simply because they breed so far south. And they're also one of the earliest and latest migrants. Yeah, that's also where you guys get Louisiana water thrush and maybe Swainson's warbler can get out here. It's a, I think it's a leftover from the last glacial maximum, uh, and it's right at the edge of the plateau. But it's not just the Acadian, and you have bald cypresses there too. Yeah, least flycatcher looks like an Acadian. Strong contrasts here, um, except short primary projection and a messy eye ring. Right? It's thick here, thin here, thin here. It's sort of a mess. Yeah, but else elsewhere it looks like an Acadian, very strong contrast. Really make sure when you see if I can look at this part. That's so important. And actually, in volume 3, we'll show that this is even more important than ever before. And more of least here. A little bit about vagrancy. In the first volume, we didn't focus too much about vagrant birds because we thought that was too much. But in the some of the experts said you didn't put like there was a least flycatcher recorded in Nevada right there. So volume 3 will put a little bit more of that detail. Yellow belly. This is one of my favorite flycatchers. It's a flycatcher that habitat is in the understory, and it's a very shy bird. You walk there, and you'll likely scare it. You got to walk slow. It's this one's nice and green and yellow, but look at you can just barely see it. No contrast between the chest and the mantle, but look how bright those wing bars are, and also the edges of the fur shoals. There we go. Crisp eye ring. That's a classic yellow belly flycatcher. Along rivers is good, yeah. Understory is really what they like. And they are one of the first to get down here because it gets cold up there pretty fast and no insects. So they're out. In fact, by August 8th, they're in Texas and moving through. And then they'll come, the juveniles will get them into October. So it's a very long, protracted window of migration. But they come very soon, even before, in early August, most of us aren't out there because it's so hot. So a lot of them slip by us without us even knowing. So we have some comparison plates here, this of the Acadian yellow-bellied and least. These are the birds that we have to deal with most east of the Rockies. So this is a good one to focus on. Here's least, yellow-bellied, and Acadian. Look at the different. Well, the interesting thing is on eastern flycatchers, the wing bar and wing panel contrasts are all very strong. On all the western type flycatchers, they're weak contrasts. So that's a good, if you, in the winter, you find a weak contrast bird in terms of wing bars and wing panel here in San Antonio, you should immediately start thinking western flycatcher, Hammond's, Dusky there. Okay. Alder flycatcher. So I'm not going to do too much on the western birds here because we're out here in the east. Here's alder flycatcher. That's actually remarkably similar to least flycatcher, but fat tail. The eye ring is a little bit thinner, but otherwise very similar to least flycatcher. And sometimes it's more similar to least than it is to willow, even though everyone would say willow and alder are impossible to identify without sound. There's your alder, and they also come very early. They breed all the way up in Alaska. So yeah, we had alders in Houston like August 3rd this year. So they're early. Okay, so you feel more comfortable with all the colors taken out now that you can see these. Hopefully, it takes practice, but you're seeing these gray birds in a different light. Any questions on? Yeah. Oh. How long do they live? I don't really know, but I don't think they live more than 5 years or so in general. But some of the bigger flycatchers we know live a long time, like the peewee. There's a greater peewee that comes back to Houston. It's got to been 10 years now. And when I was growing up as a kid, there was a thick-billed kingbird that came to Southern California for 10 years. So the big ones live longer. The little ones don't. And then the question is, how far do they go before they stop? Yeah, I don't think anyone knows on that. I don't think they are really the long distance types of marathon migrants like um, thrushes, but they're not strong flyers after all. So they probably stop every day. Uh, yeah. So I have a few more. I don't know what time I can. It's 7:30. When do we start? Okay. Yes. If you can't, that's just what we would recommend in general, unless you can hear them. Actually, even if you hear them, you got to be very careful because a pip and a whip. Some of us can't distinguish that. I've seen that happen. You really want to record it, but there are subtle differences, and we go through that in the book. But so, how much more time do I have? Well, I guess I realize I won't go through all. Yeah, I'll show a little bit of the second volume, and then I'll end. I can end on Willow and Alder, something that we'll show for the first time, and yeah. Well, let me. Uh, I won't go into the volume two is on the Miarchus and kingbirds. Okay, and we thought it really needed its separate treatment because in the Miarchus and kingbirds, things like wing bar contrasts are really useless. So it just made it hard to put these into the same book. So in there, these are the things we kind of focus on more: are the chest belly contrast, or the pattern of the tail. It's rufous and dark on the outer margins, which with the Empidonax, they're all the same color, so it doesn't matter. But that's why we treated things differently. And so uh, we have um, all the tail patterns lined up for you. So if you see a Miarchus, get a photo of the undertail if you can, and then focus on these relative intensity of colors. These are ordered in terms of brightest to the dullest, or the different types of contrast, strong contrast, weak contrast between the chest and the belly, ash-throated, great crested. Okay. So this but if you did the first volume, you're prepared to use this one. We learned from the first volume with vocalizations that we really need to make it uh, condense it into like a summary figure. And that's what we have now. All the Miarchus here, and they'll say which ones have a whip, which ones don't, right? Uh, in the first volume, you have to look through every single page for that. So, um, and so that's one that's good for you. You guys here have brown crested and ash throated, and so there we go. Um, the tail pattern shown here. Wing panel contrast is still of use for the Miarchus. Volume 3 will have photos, a lot of Texas stuff. Texas is a good place for flycatchers. and more flycatchers. And then kingbirds, we zoom through, we could spend hours on this, of course. But here in Texas, we're really lucky or unlucky that we have to deal with these two guys, and they're tough. And so we also go through them, how to identify them. It's about contrast, but there's some new features. If you look at the primaries of all the different kingbirds, you see the spacings of the primary tips, or this has a really wide spacing. Okay? And it's such a technical thing, but if you can get a photo of that, you can go home. You know what it is. No argument anymore. Yeah, so, and as we did this, we realized, oh, we should go back and look at the NPIDs this way too. No one's ever really done that. And so that's, so do you want to see that part? Okay. And then, yeah, so let me just show you the wing. This will be in volume 3, and it's also for bird banders. And the funny thing is, bird banders, believe it or not, have more trouble identifying flycatchers than in the field. And that's because when you have the bird in your hand, it's agitated. You can't tell if it's fat, rounded head, because it's everything. It's crazy. It's all screwed up. Yeah, and it's making weird noises too. So almost nothing works. And the measurements that are given for, say, separating some of the flycatchers like willow and alder, you need to make like 8 measurements and then put it in some complex formula. You don't have the time, and the bird's moving, and you got another bird coming. You can't do it. So most of the time you just give up, and they're misidentified all the time in hand. That's the irony of it. But the feather, this is the secondaries, this is the primaries, and there's the outer primaries. If you look at them, they actually have this bulge here, some of them. It's called an emargination. And it turns out that at least there's 10 primaries. So you have to count them. But we will show you with practice, it turns out the one at this one is always P8. It's the 8th one. 9 and 10 are always hidden. You'll never see 9 and 10. 8 is always here. You know that, you start 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 right there. And that's 10 of them. And in least, in all the NPIDs, except for Acadian, I think, and willow, the 6th primary has a bump. In willow and alder, no bump. You probably won't be able to use this without a photo. But sometimes you really want to get that ID, and I will tell you that this is the way to help resolve. But the other one is the way the bird folds its wings matters a lot. And so we can measure the distance between the tips of all these primaries. So the dashed ones are the hidden ones. You'll never see them on the folded wing. So we call this the primary tip spacing. And you can measure that in the fields, or you can take it from the photos. And we look at the relative lengths, okay? I'll show you. I'll show you just willow and alder. And these were made, the measurements were, we visited many collections. And we measured like 400 dead willow flycatchers specimens and alders, ones that we are sure of their ID. And this is willow, and this is alder. And this is the absolute, first of all, millimeters. So alder has a longer wing than willow. Now, it's subtle enough that you probably can't tell that in the field, and the males and females are a little bit, different sizes. But willow, alder does have long, but alder breeds in the boreal forest, far north, and they winter in South America. Willow avoids those boreal forests, is further south. But the longer the wings, the further they migrate. Okay? So it makes sense. But the other thing to look at is, you see 7 to 6 and 6 to 5. This is longer than this. Whereas in here, they're about the same. I don't know if you can see that. it's remarkable that you can see that because it's such a small difference. But you can see it, and that's the same thing. You can see when your picture frame is tilted by 2 degrees, actually 1 degree. It's going to bother you. I bet. Believe me, it'll bother you. And 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 then the beauty of this is it happens this demarcation to be when it's 1-to-1. So when you can see 2 things are not symmetrical or not equal, the human eye can see it. You might not be able to measure it, but you can see it. So this is showing you that. This is the actual data. Yeah, no one will believe us until you actually show the data because, but this is the width of P665, P767. The absolute, they're the same, but they cluster completely in 2 different clusters, pretty much. And these lines are the slopes. This was saying they're the equal length. And so it pretty much breaks down right where they're equal. And so alder flycatcher, the outer tip is longer than the inner primary right there. So 95% of the birds of willow are higher than here, 1.035, and 95% of alders are less than 1.035. So yeah, there might be 5% you can't use this on, but that's a lot better than what we've been having before, right? And it turns out every MPID has a unique code like this. I won't show you all that, but that'll be in volume 3. And here's some other features. Look at the way well, there's a few weirdos there. I'm not sure what's going on there. You might misidentify one occasionally, but it's better than we have ever been before. So here is a willow and an alder. So look at this right here. See, this is the 6.5, 6.7. Well, I'm not suggesting killing the birds, but now with cameras, everyone's got a camera, and of course it has to be a pretty good photo. But the price of and the quality of cameras have come down. So the quality has come down. Yeah, get photos, and especially of this. And see this 6.7, it's reversed. Yellow-bellied is like this, okay, and least is more like this. So, but you can use other features to separate the 2. So when you put all those in combination, it's a unique code. But yeah. So, and if you're banding birds, this all of a sudden makes it so much easier. You don't have to get your calipers out and here's the bird. And like, come on, open your darn wing. Let me get this, and it moves this wing. Just hold the bird and say, take your iPhone out and take a picture of the profile, and you're done. And a lot of when you're banding birds, usually the photos we get is the bird looking at you, right? Because you're holding it on his back. That's the useless photo. And then sometimes they will open the wing. That's also not very useful. Just turn it to the side and do that, and you're good. Yeah. And so that's it. That's the hint of what's to come. Yeah. Make your life easier if you have a camera. Okay, well, thank you very much. And questions, and yeah, and I have books up here if anyone wants, and I'll of course sign any. Yeah, for the MPIDs. Oh, the question was how much hybridization is there? Visually, I think it's very difficult to tell, right? Because they all look the same. So I don't think you would know if you had a hybrid visually, right? But calls, yeah, the MPIDs don't really hybridize, except the Pacific Slope Cordilleran, but they just lump those back together. But kingbirds, they do hybridize a little bit. Well, Western and Eastern have hybridized. Actually, Western and scissor-tailed flycatcher is probably it might be the most common hybridization after Western and Eastern. Actually, scissor-tailed is very closely related to Western kingbird. Their calls are similar. Yeah,
They
yeah.
look so different.
They look so different. And then there's been suggestion of couches and tropical hybrids, but I don't know. They look so similar. It could just be variation. Who knows on those? Yeah.
The other question?
Yeah.
Bowling here. Before anybody leaves, we're going to have the drawing.
That ever an issue? When did they molt?
Yeah. Molt is a very interesting thing. Yeah, obviously, if there's molting going on, you can't use this. You have to make sure you count the feathers properly. Fortunately, like for MPIDs, fortunately for all of us north of the border, it's not an issue in general because they don't molt until they reach their wintering grounds. Yeah. Now Hammond's does molt partly on the breeding grounds, but by the time they start moving, they'll probably arrest the molt, and so what you'll see is a fresh feather and a worn feather next to each other, but you won't see like a little short guy, a missing feather. And then the other one, Acadian also will have a little bit of molt on the breeding ground. So you do have to pay attention to that. But we really haven't, with all the specimens we looked at, only a few percent we have to ever worry about the molt, which was surprising. Even on the samples that we looked at from Central America and South America, I think that feather grows in very fast. The odds of you matching that window where it's missing a feather, so they do it in sequence too. Yeah, yeah. Well, there are. I'm not an expert on that, but there's the Western flycatcher, Pacific Slope and Cordilleran. They are genetically different, but at what point do you say it's that different that you call it a species? That's really us humans.
How many alleles?
Yeah, that's us. I mean, who knows? I'm myself kind of skeptical of trying to split too many things. They lump them after all, and it goes back and forth within the bird community. I'm not part of that group, but the other ones, I don't think they have many subspecies. Willow does. It has 4 subspecies, but we didn't find in all our measurements any significant difference between the two. And in terms of genetics, I think there's a continuum. Maybe the southwestern willow, which is in California and Arizona, that one you could identify. They're a little bit longer billed than the other willows. That one is an endangered subspecies, so that's actually one to watch out for. They're almost gone from California.
Does everybody